Hello and welcome to another tutorial. This is how to make a hunting rifle. This is based on the one from The Last of Us, which Ellie uses, and that's why it doesn't have a scope. It's got a moving trigger, so you can press that, and it's also got kind of a bolt mechanism, so you can pull this back and it opens up a little area, and then it'll also lock in place. So there's a rubber band in there. So that's what we're making. All the things that you need you can get in a trip to B&Q. So what you'll need for the main part of it, this is insulation foam. I've got this big board and it was a bit bigger. This was £6 for all of this. So it's not too expensive, it's good material. So you're going to want two bits of PVC pipe of different lengths. There's this one which is a bit thicker. You want at least 25 centimetres of it, and it's 21 millimetres on the outside diameter. For the thicker one, you're going to want at least 60 centimetres, and the outside diameter is 15 millimetres. You're also going to want a bit of wood for the trigger. Now, the bit of wood that I used was 1 centimetre by 3 centimetres, and you want at least 10 centimetres of it to work with. You're also going to want a metal U-bolt for the trigger guard, as well as a longer screw for the bolt. And if you want to cover it up to make it rounder, you're going to want a bit of clay, as well as various shades of brown for the wood texture. You're going to want a spray can of gunmetal paint as well. So total price for this is around £35. Now if you've already got the paints, it'll be around £20. As for what you need to put it together, you want a craft knife and different grits of sandpaper for getting the foam into shape. You want a hot glue gun for sticking it all together, and you could do with a drill just to get some of the holes in there, and obviously brushes for the paint. I think that's all you need for it, so it's really easy. So we can move on with the tutorial. If you look in the description of the video, there'll be a link to the templates of which I use in this. So once you've transferred the template onto the foam, now it's time to cut out. So use whatever knives and cutting stuff you can. What you want to do is cut away from the line first of all, and then get closer in. Alright, so that's the size of it now. So you can go in with the other knives and then try and get it down as flat as possible, and then after that you can start shaping. So, there's the basic shape. It's a nice size. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use reference picture just to see where it's thicker, what sort of shape it is, and I can use that to start carving inwards a little bit as well. So I can make this bit a little thicker, give it some size difference, and then this comes finished towards the end, but you don't want to cut it too much. So alright, so this is it, a bit more shape now. You can see the edges are curved, it curves quite nicely. So one thing to look out for, this is where the trigger is going to be coming out of, so make sure that you can get your hand in comfortably and be able to do a trigger pulling action. So I'm going to go over with a rough sanding block and just curve it down a bit more, and it shapes it a bit more. And then I'm going to go over with a lower grit sanding block and smooth it down so I can get this as smooth as possible. So here we go, it's a lot more sanded down, it's quite smooth now, so nice close up. So that's the sort of design I've gone for. If you're using this stuff, it's going to get very dusty, so you're going to want to go over it with tissues and whatnot and try and get all this dust off as much as possible. So once you've got the foam as smooth as it can be, now it's time to do some of the pipe work. So you've got your thicker and your thinner pipes. Now what you want to do with the thicker is where the bulge of this comes out, you want to do a couple of centimetres in front of it and about 5 centimetres behind it. So this is one that I've cut out already, and that's the way that it looks on mine, that's the rough size, so that's good. So now you're going to want to draw a bit of details on here. So you're going to cut these out later, but for just now I've just drawn it out in Sharpie. So this is the hole where the cartridge from the bullet is ejected after firing. It's about half of the size of the bulge on here, and the hole is thinner than the thinner piping. Then I've also got this L shape here. This is the action where the bolt is going to follow. So this is a little mock-up of it. This is a nail which follows the path. So it'll be locked in here, it'll go forward a bit, up to the top, and then it'll be pulled back. You can see the line on there. So the way I've done this is if I line the nail up with the end of this hole, where it's will be locked in place, that is just further than the hole that I'm going to cut out later. And then once it's been pushed forward and brought fully back, that line is just behind that hole. And then the thickness is about the rough thickness of this nail. Right, so just in case that's a little bit confusing for you, this is a test one that I made earlier. See, the nail is locked in place now, it can't go up and it can't go backwards, it can only go forwards. So if I bring it forward and then up and then I bring it back, and you see that pipe goes fully backwards. You're also going to want to make sure that where this nail will be when it's in its resting place, and also while it's moved forward, that this line doesn't meet the edge, because there's going to be the barrel of the actual gun is going to come in here as well, and you don't want them colliding, otherwise this won't come out. Right, so now I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to use a combination of using the drill to get in these little places and using knives and pretty much anything to get this out. So now if you can find something which already looks like a bolt, go with that. What I'm doing, because I can't find anything, is I'm going to use a screw, just a long screw. I'll put this in a vise and just hammered it into this shape. Now what I'm going to try is, this is polymer clay. Now I've marked off where this screw goes in, you can just about see that on camera. Now that's as far as the screw goes. After that I'm going to cover it in this clay and put a ball on the end. So there we go, that looks a bit more like the bolt of a gun now. So I've left that edge open so that it can screw into the plastic tube. Otherwise this is going in the oven on a bit of greaseproof paper on a tray. It's going to go in at 110 degrees for about 10 minutes. So if you're doing this, be extremely careful, because the metal is going to stay hotter for longer. So now it's time to do a test assembly. I'll line all these up where they're going to be. I've got two lines on this scope, on this barrel. I've got one line which is where it actually goes into that other piece a little bit, and then the other line which is where I think the end of the barrel should be. So I'm going to cut that in a moment. In the Last of Us game it's quite a short one, so that's why it's so short on this. If you're going for a different game, just look up reference pictures online and see how far across or short you want it. So I can put that on the line where I want it and then just squeeze, and it gives me a nice straight edge. So now it's about time to start putting it together a little bit. So one of the first things you want to do is measure up where the bolt piece is going. I've already measured up mine. It's just above this bulger piece. So once you've got that piece in, if you've done like I've done and measured where it's going to go in the pipe, just hold it there. I can take this away and just use a pen to mark where that end is. So now what I need to do is cut a slight groove for this to go inside to the end of there. So what I'm going to do is I've got some sandpaper, put it into a tighter curve and then rub it down. So this is what I've ended up with. It goes down about a third of the way. So now that you've got that in place, you can start measuring up for the other piece which is going on. So you're going to want to put 2 dots where you need to carve up to. And then you need to carve that out again. So here it is now. You can see the 2 size grooves. If I put this bolt bit on now, you might just be able to pick on camera that the foam in front of it leads straight into it. So if I slide this other piece on, I need 3 hands for this. So if I slide it on, it just goes in nice and neat like that. Use tissues and towels to get off the dust again. So this is what I'm using for the trigger guard. It's just a U-bolt that I found in the garage. So for marking up where you want to do, hold the gun as if you would be normally, and then hold your finger where the trigger would be. I'm using a pen or a marker, just mark on either side of your finger. Like that. And then you can take this U-bolt, and if you put it like that, either side of those marks, and try and even it up, you can put a mark on each side. So those lines there are where I'm going to put in my U-bolt. Now what you want to do is get a drill bit which is the same size as your U-bolt, and you're going to want to drill in. Now I don't trust an electric drill with this really soft foam, so I'm just going to do it myself. I'm going to hold it straight down, pop it in the middle and just do it really slowly. And I'll do a bit on each side and I'll pop this in and see how it's starting to look. But there we go, that is it now. I've not come out the top. However, if you've got a longer U-bolt and you come out the top, don't worry about it, you can cover it up, but you're going to have to cut the bolt. Now that you've got your trigger guard in place, it's not glued in yet, now it's time to work on the actual trigger itself. So there's a couple of options which you can do here. One of them is a non-moving trigger, which is just a bit of wood. You can cut it flat there. You're going to cut this out into just the normal trigger shape, and then you carve out a little bit of off here and then glue it in place. So it'll look good, but it won't be able to move. So the other option is having a moving one, which is that same piece but also with an extra bit of wood with the middle carved out and a spring. So make sure you have this angle on there so that when both of these edges line up, that's how it will be normally, and then when you press it down it locks into place like that, so that when I put this spring in the middle of there it'll look like that, and then I'll put a tack in there as used as a pivot point so that when I press down it'll spring back up into place. Alright, so this is the piece of wood that I used to cut them out of. It is 1/2 inch by 1 inch. So you're going to want to cut a block of this out, and then you're going to want to cut halfway down like this. What I did for this is use a saw to cut out the lines and then use a wood file just to smooth it out. And then you're also going to want the shape of the trigger, and then you're going to cut that in half down the middle. And then that's pretty much how I made that. I cleaned it up a little bit and give it a bit of shape. And then you'll carve out a bigger area and plop this in there. So you can lay this flat on there and then use a pen just to mark around the outside of the area you need to cut. And then you're going to want to use a knife or anything just to try and get in there and get as much of that out as you can without damaging the surrounding areas. So here we go, there's an area carved out there, so that when I put this in, it's almost flush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out this area, and then I'm going to cut these bits. Now it's time to put things together a little bit. So you want to take both sides of your barrel. Now this line, that's the bit which it's adding up to there, like that. And because I want this flat, if I do it like this, it's going to be slightly off-centered. So I've got a bit of the pipe, which this was cut from. I'm going to put the longer barrel in, so that when I press down, this is flat, and then this is flat as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of hot glue on here, and then press it in, and then flatten it out like this. Nice big blob of glue on there. I'm not too bothered if it spills out a little bit because I can cut it off later. So now it's on there, I'm just going to press down until it's cooled down mostly. So now that it's hardened up a little bit, what I want to do is close off this gap here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill it with hot glue, let it spill out, and then I'll cut it off with a knife later. So once that's hardened, I'm going to put a couple more little squirts on just to give it a nice solid seal, and that'll make it a lot harder as well. So I almost forgot, but down the end of the rifle there's normally a bit of a scope. So I've just made this plastic triangle. I just use a bit of spare plastic just to cut it into this sort of shape. So you want the longest against the barrel and the shortest facing forward. So again, I'm just going to hot glue that in place. So you might just be able to see I've got a little marker there, and that's lined up with this line here. So that's facing the top, and then that will be facing the top as well. So there we go, it's quite messy, but I'm going to cut it off. I'll leave it a bit of a stand, but that's it. So here is what I'm going to be painting today. I've got the bolt, this trigger guard, both parts of the trigger, there's the sliding part of the barrel, and then the entire barrel. I'm going to be painting that all gunmetal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave both of these to dry, and then I'll put a few more coats on and then come back to it. So while your other bits and pieces are drying, now you want to seal this. Now I'm using clear lacquer, but what you don't want to do is just spray it straight on here. You want to test it first, because some spray paints and sprays will eat through kinds of foam. So I've already tested it on here. What you do is just spray it on like you would on here, and then leave it for a few hours. Make sure it doesn't eat away at anything, because you don't want to put however much time you spent into this and just have it go by spraying it. You want to do this in thin coats and then leave it to dry. So the reason that you're doing this and sealing it is so that when you paint it, it just doesn't absorb straight into it. So it saves on how much paint you need to put into it. So it should make it a little bit easier to paint as well. Now it's finally time to start painting this. What I've done is just get some basic acrylic paints and mix them up into a dark brown colour. I'm going to do all of it brown as a base colour, and then I'm going to go over it a few times with different browns to give it a grain texture. So I'm going to let this to dry now, and then I'll paint the tip as well, and then get back to some other colours. So that's after a couple of the darker layers. I've mixed in some of the lighter brown colours that I had, and now I'm going to put that on as another grain. Now what I'm going to be doing is sort of dry brushing, so I'll get a bit of paint on, but I'll take most of it off. So I've just got little bits on the paintbrush, but it's mostly dry. And then I can just take a bit off on some paper or card, and then on here I can lightly brush over in the direction that I want the grain till it brings out the nice colour of that, like that. So I can do that all the way up the barrel, and I'll do that in a few different light shades and some darker shades as well. So you might be able to tell a little bit of a difference already. This bit has the lighter paint, but this bit doesn't. Now you can't tell too much of a difference right now because I've not done such a different colour. What I'm going to do is add more paint as I go along and do lots and lots of layers of this. And there we go. So that is my nice wood texture that I've finished now. Just before you finish, have a look around for any white dots of the foam showing through and just cover them up now and get it over with. Other than that, it looks quite nice. Just do as many different layers of different colours as you can and it'll look nice. Alright, so now the paint on this is properly settled, I'm going to use the same clear sealant that I used before, just to give it an extra layer of protection on top. This just makes it so that the paint's less likely to rub and chip off, and it'll give it a more of a polished look, as a gun normally would be. You want to assemble the trigger before you put it into the gun. So with mine it's got a slight slope facing towards the front of the gun. So when I assemble it, it's going to be this way around. So you've got your spring, which you've taken from just a normal pen, and then you can slide it together like that, and then you want to measure up your spring from the wood to the other part of the wood and see how much of it you need, and then you can cut it with some pliers. So you want to take your hot glue and you're going to glue one end of it onto this notch here first of all, and make sure it's facing straight up like that. Once that's dried, you can glue the other part. Now you want to be careful while you're doing this because you don't want it to gunk up anything, but make sure that these two edges here are lined up properly. And once again, let that cool down properly. Now that the trigger is glued and cooled down, you want to create a pivot point by using a tack and hammering it through, and that will act as the pivot point, so when you press it down, it doesn't just press down, it presses to the side. So I'm going to do it around there on mine, towards the bottom, but far enough in that it's not going to splinter this wood and chip it. And then I'll use some pliers just to get off the tip. So if you want the inside to pop into place and be locked into place when it's there, you're going to want to put an elastic band so that it'll do that. Once this is in, I want it to be tight when it's at this end, but when it gets to out there I want it loose. I don't want it tight all the way back here, otherwise it'll be too much tension on there. So what I'm going to do is take this rubber band and get something like the ink from a pen, and I can just press it in there, and then I can fill it up with hot glue and set that in place, and then it definitely won't move out. So you really just want to fill it up as much as you can just to lock it in place. So this is completely dried now and it's stuck in solid. So I can attach it into here. Now because I've filled this up with hot glue, this is going to be a lot harder to get in now, but it's going to be held in place and it's not going to rotate out. So I put that in and line it up and then just start twisting this in. So the position that I've chosen is, if this is facing the front, this is going to be across but to the back ever so slightly. And then on the underside, I'm going to put it into the place and then just mark on there where I want it. So I can undo the tension now and bring the rubber band out, and I'm going to glue it in place while it's slackened off a little bit, and then when I put it back under, it'll be nice and strong and it won't fall out. You don't want to hot glue it while it's under tension, because otherwise you're going to have to hold it there for 10 minutes. So this is a little bit awkward to handle, but I'll put just a dab of glue on there for now, and then I can press it down onto it. And then once that's dried, I can just build up a little layer around it to make it extra strong. Time to glue the trigger on the inside. And then you're going to want to take your hot glue gun and just put it in the bottom, don't get it on the sides. And then you want to press this down slowly until it reaches the glue. And then once it's in place, don't touch it, don't try and press the trigger down until it's completely cooled and set. Now what you can do as well is glue the trigger guard in place. One big drop down there, but not too much. Put one in each side. And then quickly press this down into it. There you go. And then again, leave that until it's completely set. Now what I'm going to do is glue the barrel to the gun itself. Now what I've done is I've cut this groove out here. I've cut out where the hot glue is, where it would fit into it there. I've cut that out, but I've also cut a groove down most of it here. That's so that the hot glue can soak into the foam a little bit and it can be a little bit deeper and it'll give it a better hold than just on top. You're also less likely of the hot glue spilling out over the side if you do this. If you've got the elastic band on, you're going to want that tight. You're also going to want this pointing exactly up. Once you're happy with where it's going to be, then you can just run the hot glue down there and then hold it in place until it cools. If you've got a temperature setting on your glue gun, set it to the highest one. Then once you've got as much as you can, try and get it on quite quickly. And then just hold it in place like that until it cools down. So there we go, once it's glued in place, pretty much done, apart from you've got a big open end here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use hot glue just to build up a bit of a base and then round it off. A bit like what I did here, and then I'll cover it in spray paint. So what I'm going to do is take the hot glue on the lower setting and just build it up ever so slowly. See, I've just got a tiny bit there. What I'll do is I'll let it cool entirely, and then I'll put another thin layer on top, and then one on top of that once that's cooled, and so on and so forth until it's blocked off, and then I can just use it to smooth it around a little bit. So this is what I mean by building it up slowly. I just circle it round and then this gap gets smaller and smaller. And that's what it looks like once it's completely covered. Now you can tell it's a little bit bumpy now. What you can actually do with this while it's still hot is sort of rub it against it. If you do it in circular motions, it'll actually melt the glue again and you can rub it into more of a rounder shape. Now you can see it's a lot more rounded off now. So do that until you're happy with it. And then what I'm going to do is paint this now. So what I've done now is just use masking tape just to cover it up as good as possible around the outside. So I definitely don't want to spray paint this. So I'm just going to use the gunmetal spray paint again just to cover that up. Then it should be done. So that's that. Spray painted it and I left it to dry for a little bit. So now it's time to take it off and see how it looks. And there we go. So there's a little bit of leakage, but not too bad. So what I'm going to do is just go over it with a bit of paint again. A bit of the brown paint. But other than that, it looks quite nice. You know, the trigger works. It's quite good. And then the bolt action is nice as well. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty impressed with that. And I'm happy with the way it turned out. So, thanks for watching this tutorial. If you're interested in The Last of Us, I've got another couple of tutorials which might be coming up, so subscribe if you'd like to see those. Other than that, I'll see you for the next tutorial. Bye. Hailstones. Literally, as soon as I finished that first coat, it started with this. Gotta love British weather, right?